Can you imagine what it would be like if World War III broke out? It would be an unimaginable situation. This woman, is she really a rich lady? She was happily getting her hair done, just ready to start a live stream to sell products. But before she could even become an internet celebrity, an emergency alert unexpectedly spread, saying that missiles were about to hit the city, with unimaginable consequences. Coco thought someone was just talking nonsense to grab attention, but when the news stations also started issuing warnings, the whole city went into chaos. When it comes to survival, the rich have a much higher chance of making it. Coco was speeding toward her private plane, as the fastest way out of the city was by air. She called her beloved boyfriend, who was completely confused by what Coco was saying over the phone, but the news made it clear to him what was happening, as the warning sirens started sounding across the city. In this situation, running over one or two people was the new normal, and no traffic cops had the time to care. Coco successfully made it to the private airport, but her beloved boyfriend was stuck halfway there. Even though Coco loved her boyfriend, on the path to survival, love had to be put aside. Her boyfriend watched helplessly as the familiar plane flew overhead, leaving him in despair. Coco chose to save her life over love, but what she didn't expect was that the plane had no pilot. The plane started shaking, and through the window, she saw a golden mushroom cloud. The city was gone. Once a bustling metropolis, now completely barren. It was like a nightmare, hoping that when she woke up, everything would be as it was before. But not everyone in the city perished. Timothy, surprisingly, survived. This man had just gotten into college, happily bouncing around. Then the shocking news hit. In half an hour, a missile would destroy the entire planet. The special bulletin urged people to live their last half hour as happily as possible. Timothy, a genius, had just gotten into college, but his joy lasted barely a second before he broke down in tears. Suddenly, two men in black entered his home, talking nonstop as soon as they walked in. It turned out they had targeted Timothy because of his high intelligence, wanting to preserve the best human genes, so they planned to take him away. Two soldiers came in with guns, taking Timothy away and locking him in a small dark room. In that room was a high-quality woman, and it seemed they were supposed to contribute to humanity. They barely had time to exchange a few words before a terrifying shock hit, likely signaling that everything above ground had been bombed and destroyed. Before they could even mourn, they were moved to another place. What was once a good earth had now become this. They entered a courtyard, where another man in black led them further in, and two people were shot dead. It turned out they had tried to escape from the underground shelter and got exposed to radiation, so they had to be executed, with only a handful of survivors left. It was such a shame to lose two more. Timothy and Emily entered the underground shelter, and the operation was like a decontamination process, clearing out all the radiation from the outside. Suddenly, a woman in black appeared, introducing herself as Venable. She divided the people there into two classes, purple for the elite and gray for the workers. Coco, who had ditched her boyfriend to escape, was also there, but she was in the gray class. She was upset because even her servant Jeff was in the purple class, while she was gray. The dining table looked luxurious, but the food barely filled their stomachs. Emily even found snakes in her room. As it turned out, their dinner that night was snake soup. Many found this exotic taste hard to stomach, but under such oppressive rule, they had no choice. If you didn't eat, you'd be licking your fingers by bedtime. Unexpectedly, the snakes in the soup came back to life and started slithering out of the bowls. Timothy, the genius, began to doubt everything. Nuclear bombs? Global radiation? The people in this underground shelter being the last humans? Everything was suddenly up for question. He and Madison were discussing their life goals when they noticed Miriam was watching them, so they parted ways. As they continued pondering their future, someone else suddenly appeared, offering them a chance to survive if they followed him, but they had to pass a test. Could Michael's words be trusted? Big questions swirled in their minds. The first person to be tested was Jeff. Michael was indeed a master within a few words. He lured Jeff into revealing his past. It turned out Jeff had been a kept man by Evie, a wealthy woman with a large appetite who kept 4 men, but Jeff was her favorite. Not only did Michael know about his past, but he also knew Jeff didn't actually like women. Jeff admitted it because he thought he'd found someone who understood him. Unexpectedly, after that conversation, Michael told Jeff to leave the room. The test was over. Jeff returned to his room, confused and thinking deeply. Suddenly, the door opened and a man in black entered. Normally, such a sight would scare anyone, but Jeff found it exciting. What followed was something we couldn't quite comprehend, a type of happiness we couldn't understand. Evie happened to pass by and heard the strange noises. Curious, she looked in and was shocked by what she saw. She was so scared she could barely breathe. Venable quickly summoned Michael to ask what was going on. She had set a rule against casual sexual relations, but Michael, full of confidence, used his sharp tongue to explain away the situation, expertly twisting the logic. It was clear from the start that Michael was a smooth talker, easily persuading Venable to reveal her back. Looking at the scars on Venable's back, it was obvious she had a difficult past. Venable thought Michael admired her history, but Michael lost interest the moment he saw her back. Miriam knew exactly when to act. This woman's jealousy always flared up at the perfect moment. From the way she was fuming, it was clear Jeff was in for a beating to extract the truth. But no matter how much Jeff was questioned or tortured, he refused to spill any information. It's not that he was being tough. He simply had no clue who that man in black really was. After Venable and Miriam left, Michael also showed up to find Jeff. Jeff, enjoying himself, thought he had found a kindred spirit, someone who shared the same joy he had the night before. But to his shock, Michael told him, "Even if you were the last man on earth, I still wouldn't love you." From Michael's perspective, Jeff was worthless, but as he left, Michael still set him free, though no one knows how he got out of the handcuffs. When Jeff reappeared in front of everyone, the most surprised was, of course, Evie. They had a big argument and then went their separate ways to rest. Strangely enough, as soon as Jeff got back to his room, the man in black appeared again. Jeff felt a mix of love and hate toward the man in black. Still reeling from Michael's earlier words, he picked up the scissors that never left his side and stabbed the man in black. At that moment, Michael coolly opened the door, and when Jeff turned around, he realized he'd stabbed Evie. Timothy then picked up Emily and kissed her deeply. In the past, they had only sneaked a few kisses, because there's a rule in the underground shelter that forbids romantic relationships. Yesterday, they accidentally stumbled into Venable's office, and they also accidentally discovered an important file on her computer. It turns out the rule against romance was something Venable added herself, possibly due to some trauma from her past. Timothy didn't care about her story anymore, only about creating his own. He slept with Emily, and before they could wake up, Venable and Miriam entered the room and captured them. It seemed like everything was under her watch, or perhaps part of Timothy's plan. Emily and Timothy confidently revealed the truth from the computer. The no romance rule was just a petty, unofficial rule created from a place of bitterness. Reasoning is the most foolish thing humans do. Whoever has the biggest fists gets to make the rules. As it's always been throughout human history, Timothy and Emily were captured and taken to a dark room. With a stance that seemed like they were about to kill Timothy, Timothy was knocked out, and Miriam was shot too. When she lifted her clothes, the place where she was shot was hollow. That hollow body left everyone scratching their heads, unable to understand what was going on. Recently, Mallory discovered she had a new ability to see the hidden darkness within people. During her interview with Michael, he also realized she was not an ordinary woman. Mallory didn't want to complicate things. She just wanted to be happy. She lifted her leg, ready to leave, but Michael, sensing Mallory was special, grabbed her. She pushed him to the ground with ease. Mallory had such immense power that it nearly exposed Michael's true nature. Michael could only think, but Mallory could read his mind and knew he was cursing her. After leaving Michael's office, Mallory became unsettled. She began to question who she really was after all. She was just a servant to Coco. How could she possess such power? Unable to hold it in, she secretly sought out Coco to share what had just happened. Coco listened, her mind filled with question marks. Coco told her to focus on the fire and try to summon flames. Mallory, with a pure heart, closed her eyes and focused her thoughts. But when she opened her eyes, nothing had changed except for Coco's attitude toward her. Coco sarcastically told her she was born mediocre and would always be mediocre. Fantasizing about superpowers wouldn't change her fate. Mallory thought Coco had a point and went back to work. Coco didn't believe in these absurd superpowers, but Michael did, and he was so shocked that he even cut his arm with a knife. He used his blood to summon answers, and a few snakes crawled out of the wound. Raising snakes with mice made sense, but hatching snakes from blood? That was a first. His craziness wasn't new, it all stemmed from childhood trauma. Michael's twisted nature had everything to do with his childhood. He would walk around pretending to be a robot, long before there was GPT-4, fantasizing that one day he would become GPT-4. But life never went as he wanted. He liked candy, but people kept giving him apples. As he grew older, he finally managed to ask a girl out to the movies, and when he awkwardly tried to put his arm around her, she slapped him hard, leaving him utterly bewildered. Even more bewildering were his parents, who were both martial arts experts. Their daily interactions involved actual fighting, and it wasn't playful, it was serious. With left hooks, deadly strikes, and soul-chasing techniques. Using everything from vases to electrical cords, they nearly strangled each other until the doorbell rang. The woman could act as if nothing had happened, open the door, and suddenly be in a good mood again. Growing up in such an environment, how could Michael not turn out twisted? As he grew, he lost interest in direct violence and became obsessed with controlling everything, making everyone his pawn. Speaking of schemes, Venable was also plotting. Suddenly, a horse-drawn carriage appeared outside, and it was empty. Inside, there was only a crate of apples. Venable and Miriam were baffled, but they came up with an idea to inject snake venom into the apples. They planned a party with an apple bobbing game, intending to take out everyone in one fell swoop, because after all their efforts to care for these people, all they got in return were complaints, so they decided to poison them all and be done with it. Venable and Miriam quietly plotted, growing more and more excited. Without delay, Venable announced the party for the next day, encouraging everyone to dress up as extravagantly as possible. The more outrageous, the more welcome. Coco and Jeff were overjoyed. They were always ones to express themselves freely. Do you know how resilient a person can be? This man actually survived a nuclear bomb. He's almost unrecognizable, surviving each day by scavenging cigarettes from the pockets of dead bodies. He would casually roast a hand or leg to eat, and with enough pepper and salt, maybe it wouldn't taste like human flesh. This extreme taste is something he quite enjoys, but if we're talking about extreme tastes, this guy is second to none. No one would dare claim first place. He killed 3 men just for a piece of meat, which means he had plenty of meat from those 3 men, but he wasn't happy, because it wasn't about the meat. Strictly speaking, it wasn't about human meat. He survived the nuclear blast because his heart was filled with hatred. He lived for revenge. He rode in a carriage to find the underground bunker, and the carriage was filled with nothing but apples. He hid under the carriage, waiting for the right moment to kill the men in black. He quietly sneaked into the bunker. Why didn't he enter through the front? Mainly because he was highly radioactive. The bunker was throwing a party, and everyone was wearing masks, especially Coco, who was the center of attention. With her glamorous makeup, she sparked every man's hormones as soon as she walked in, especially this one man who kept following her. She took the man to the bedroom, already excited about what would happen, but when he removed his mask, Coco was shocked. It was the boyfriend she had abandoned that day. The man glared at Coco with hatred and stabbed her, killing her instantly. But Coco wouldn't be lonely for long. Everyone at the party would be poisoned by an apple. This was Venable and Miriam's plan, and Miriam had it all set up perfectly. A party and a game of apples to take out everyone in one go. Venable was pleased with Miriam's efficiency this time, but Michael didn't attend the party, so they had to go to his room with guns to take care of him. Michael was casually reading a book in his room, while Venable approached with a smug look, gently and mockingly saying to Michael, "I'm here to kill you." Michael couldn't help but laugh. He loved seeing people try to kill him but fail. His blind confidence seemed almost ridiculous, and Venable, seeing Michael's calmness even in the face of death, didn't want to waste time and ordered Miriam to shoot him. But Venable underestimated the danger. The most dangerous person is often the one closest to you. This wasn't a joke. Losing trust meant losing a life, and this time it was Venable's life. Venable could never understand why this happened. She didn't realize that no matter how loyal a robot is, you can't override the programming. And Michael is not just a hacker, he's a programming genius. Besides, Michael and Miriam already had a connection, a relationship from the beginning. All Michael did was restore Miriam's memories. Everyone else was dead, leaving only the 2 of them. But did you think that made them the winners? What I never expected was that they could actually be resurrected. Do you know the difference between magic and witchcraft? This is a magic school. A group of young guys came to learn magic. It's like going to school, complete with exams. They formed a small circle and chanted spells together. Their powers could deconstruct molecules and understand every atom. The magical moment came when the fragments came together into a ball. It looked impressive, but their teacher saw something even more shocking in a short video that left everyone stunned. A man was punching and kicking a boy, and then the man suddenly got stuck to the wall. As if some force held him there, he was helplessly pulled to the ceiling, and his arms and legs were torn off. When he hit the ground, his head exploded. Where did this force come from? It came automatically from the boy, and he didn't even know he had this power. It had nothing to do with gravity. The magic teachers were both terrified and thrilled. They had always been overshadowed by the witches, but now they wanted to find this boy. That boy was Michael. It turned out the magic school was just a cover for recruitment. Their true identity was a group of sorcerers. They found Michael. Michael was still locked up in a prison, and the teacher told him he had a powerful force inside him. He could help Michael release it, to help him control it. Michael truly had a dark power within him. Whenever he got angry, the person in front of him would suffer. The teacher gestured, and the prison door opened automatically. Michael was immediately intrigued. At that moment, a prison guard ran over. Was this a jailbreak? The teacher waved his hand, and the guard was pinned to the wall, sparking Michael's interest even more. Michael followed the teacher to the underground bunker, which had now become the magic school. The teacher successfully convinced Michael to join as a student. When Michael arrived, all the students came out to greet him. Because he wasn't just anyone, they welcomed him warmly, and he had the demeanor of a prince. After some time, Michael not only showed immense talent but also learned to control the dark force within him. On the day of the exam, he retrieved a book from the mirror stone with his bare hands. This move not only amazed the teacher but also frightened him. If one day he became uncontrollable, it would be terrifying to even imagine. He also had the ability to teleport instantly. The teacher tried to track him with a knife, but with just a flick, Michael teleported to another spot. This was easy for him, but what was even more shocking was that he could make it snow indoors. The teachers couldn't tell if the chill they felt was from their hearts or their bodies, but they couldn't handle it either way. The mentors began to argue again. Some wanted to groom him into a force to fight the witches. Others were terrified of the darkness inside him, and so they quarreled endlessly. Where there's a men's magic academy, naturally there's also a women's magic academy. This woman was one of the teachers there, and there was also a student who stunned the audience. But her charm wasn't terrifying, it was romantic. A white rose could not only turn into a blue rose but also shed its petals. And magically, each petal transformed into a butterfly, fluttering freely through the air. The teacher smiled with satisfaction, a look of love in her eyes. They had never seen anything like it and thought it was the best magic in the world. They rode in luxury cars to the men's academy, intending to show off their magic. 3 women went to negotiate with 4 men. Who do you think would have better persuasion skills? Watch as Queenie invited a man to a hotel, but from that day on, she could never leave the hotel. The man was a chatterbox, and whether or not Queenie understood, he just kept talking. Queenie didn't want to listen, she just wanted to go home. Finally, Venable came to get her, and Queenie followed her. They successfully made it through the first door but couldn't get through the second. When Venable looked back, Queenie was gone. When Venable returned to the man's room, Queenie was still sitting across from him, just like before. Venable, not one to give up easily, grabbed Queenie's hand and tried again to make it through the first door, but once through the second door, Queenie disappeared again. Venable panicked and went back for Queenie, but her efforts only led to repeating the same cycle over and over. This was worse than prison, because this was called the gates of hell. As a proud witch, Venable felt this was the ultimate humiliation. She called in the magic mentors for support, and they were confident. After all, they had an ace up their sleeve. Michael, whatever the witches could do, the sorcerers could do too. And whatever the witches couldn't do, the sorcerers could still handle. Queenie kept playing cards with the man they had played countless rounds by now. Then, Michael suddenly opened the door and entered the eerie little room. He casually extended his hand to Queenie and easily led her out. Just like that, he solved the problem the witches couldn't. While the witches were still thinking the Queenie situation was a major issue, Michael had already brought her back to the bunker. When the witches heard this unbelievable news, they couldn't believe it and went to see for themselves. Sure enough, Queenie was standing right there, alive and well, but instead of being happy, they were horrified. Venable fainted from shock, while Michael stood there confidently, smiling with his dark powers fully under control. She saw a group of men approaching her, treating her not as a woman but as food, biting into her piece by piece. In that moment of crisis, she saw Michael smiling, clearly enjoying the scene. If someone's biting you while another is standing by smiling, it's obvious who gave the order. Fortunately, it was all just a nightmare. But after waking from such a nightmare, would you like Michael if you saw him in person? You'd probably hate him at first sight. Venable tasked Michael with completing the 7 wonders. If he succeeded, he would become the next supreme witch. No man in history had ever reached such heights. Michael agreed without hesitation. Venable had reached such heights because, as a child, he had saved a little deer with the power of love. That power of love changed the course of his life. When love meets darkness, what kind of chemical reaction will occur? That's up to Michael's fate. He was undoubtedly the most outstanding student at the magic school, and all the other students adored him. The mentors also valued him greatly. To prepare him for becoming the supreme witch, they used red fire to illuminate and blue fire to burn, celebrating the supreme ritual in advance. The students felt their moment of glory was approaching, and they grabbed some beer to celebrate with the men. The men, however, weren't interested in celebrating. They felt something was seriously wrong with Michael. Especially with that dark power, it could easily turn him into the next great evil. One man packed his bags overnight, planning to leave. When the students tried to stop him, he raised a hand, and the student was pinned to the wall. The man reached a gas station, intending just to fill up his tank. Miriam also pulled in, pretending to fill up her car, saying the hose wasn't long enough and asking the man to help. The man really did help, because at this time, the Supreme Witch still used love to influence people, so when someone needed help, he was willing to lend a hand. Miriam pretended to drop her wallet, and as she bent down to pick it up, she slashed the man's leg with a knife. Then she poured gasoline on him and set him on fire. This man wasn't just handsome, he had skills too. He actually made it to hell. Can you imagine what hell is like? It's not much different from how it's shown on TV. There were classrooms, and there were labs. A teacher told a woman to dissect a frog. The woman looked at the still croaking frog and couldn't bear to do it. The teacher took her hand and guided the knife down, killing the frog. The woman screamed in terror, bringing the frog back to life by clasping her hands together. The teacher wasn't impressed. He just grabbed the woman's hand again and made another cut, killing the frog once more. The woman screamed again, and the frog was revived. This cycle repeated over and over. It was Michael's arrival that broke the awkward situation. He stabbed the teacher to death. The witches wanted him to take the trial, which was to descend into hell and bring the woman back. What the witches couldn't do, he did. He brought the woman back. The witches were terrified, but being able to reunite with the woman was more joyful than scary. But once they realized how powerful Michael was, their fear returned, and one even had a nosebleed from fright. The woman told the witches what she had seen in hell, saying she had always been sensitive to darkness, but Michael's darkness made her truly afraid. In this moment of panic, a white witch suddenly appeared. They thought she was some great sorceress, but it turned out she was a singer, and everyone enjoyed the performance like it was a concert. After the performance, they went back to their rooms, trembling with fear again. Venable sent a woman out to get help. The woman, wearing high heels, sunglasses, and smoking a cigarette, confidently arrived at an ancient castle. The place looked eerie, but as a high-level beauty, she dared to enter. Madison and Behold pretended to be a couple and bought the old house. The real estate agent was baffled who would buy such an old house with such a history. He told Madison that the house had a lot of stories, and most of the people who had lived there were no longer alive. Madison pretended to stay calm, but once she stepped inside, her nerves kicked in. She wasn't there for thrills, though Venable had sent her to investigate Michael's origins. As witches, they were used to opening doors with magic, but here, they had to use keys, as their magic didn't work. In the past, a simple gesture would open any door, but Madison had to gather her courage and step inside manually. She couldn't understand how a house that had been empty for decades was so clean and tidy. Behold and Madison went to a room and took out a magical artifact to open their third eye. Once it was open, they could see all the spirits and demons. They started wandering through the house, and suddenly, a small red ball rolled down the stairs. A little red ball wasn't scary on its own. Madison picked up the ball, but then a creature lunged at her, giving her a fright. At that moment, an old lady appeared, boldly declaring herself the true owner of the house. Madison was surprised to see her drinking whiskey, since when could ghosts drink? Indeed, this old lady was Michael's grandmother. She had died years ago, but her soul still lived on, clinging to her old habits. She listened to music every day and even inspected the maid's cleaning work to make sure it was spotless. She had OCD, and if the house wasn't perfectly clean, she would be very uncomfortable. The maid, who was also a ghost, had grown tired of putting up with her temper, and it drove the old lady crazy. Do you know the frustration of someone with OCD? She was always trying to find a way to get the maid out of the house because people with OCD tend to have a bit of a control issue. As the mistress of the house, she couldn't allow a servant to talk back to her. Constance, Michael's grandmother, told Madison and Behold that she could reveal Michael's origins if they could find a way to get the maid out of the house. As a ghost, the maid could only leave if her bones were removed from the property. So, Madison and Behold started digging in the garden. They dug so hard that they didn't just find one set of bones, they filled an entire sack. When the maid saw her own bones, she was deeply moved, because it meant she could finally leave and end her eternal servitude. Madison even promised to let her choose where she wanted to go. A beautiful soul with kindness, Madison was charming in her own way. The maid hugged Madison, crying, soaking her clothes with tears and snot. To Madison's surprise, the maid chose to go to a cemetery. Having fulfilled Constance's condition, they could now hear Michael's story. And what a story it was! Michael's birth was marked by death. His mother died during childbirth. His father, devastated, left to travel the world. leaving Michael in his grandmother's care. Constance also had another grandson, Tate, who was, technically, Michael's older brother. Tate was a wicked man. He had killed dozens of his classmates and even impregnated his girlfriend's mother. Seeing that Tate was a lost cause, Constance placed all her hopes on Michael, but little did she know that when it came to evil, Tate was nothing compared to Michael. What Tate did was merely a drop in the ocean for Michael. As soon as Michael was old enough, he began killing, often leaving rats, cockroaches, and flies hanging from the rafters. Constance had to clean up the little bodies and bury them under her rose garden, giving the animals some dignity while also fertilizing her roses. But Michael's hobby grew darker with time. As he aged, he started killing cats and dogs. Constance, who once loved roses, now couldn't stand them, as the entire garden was filled with small corpses beneath the flowers. But killing animals no longer satisfied him, and soon, he began killing workers, while other kids played with toys. Michael treated real killing like a game. He was extraordinary, not only in his tastes but also in his rapid growth. One night, he grew 10 years older in a single night, becoming a young man. Whenever Constance tried to teach him, even one extra word annoyed him, and one night, he grabbed her by the throat. Constance nearly died, but Michael suddenly let go, tears in his eyes, calling her grandma. It seemed he didn't even realize what he had done. This wasn't depression, it was a coexistence of a human and a demon within his body. Just like everyone has both good and evil inside them. From that day on, Constance no longer dared to lecture him, but the killing never stopped. One day, she opened the door to find a priest dead, and after finishing his hunt, Michael moved on to play video games. He still looked as innocent as ever, staring at Constance with those same wide-eyed, childlike expressions. Constance played music, drank whiskey, and smoked cigarettes. She took an overdose of pills and ended her life. Better to go this way than have her throat slit. The man who liked to handle things physically was a psychologist, technically Michael's mother's husband, but not Michael's father. Out of love for his wife, he tried to save Michael. The man started encouraging Michael to explore other hobbies to distract him from his urge to kill. He discovered Michael was incredibly smart. With an off-the-charts IQ, he could solve a Rubik's Cube in no time, arranging it in his favorite colors. No one could beat him at chess, and even in a simple game of catch, he threw the ball with immense strength. But when Tate showed up, all the progress and sunshine was wiped away. Michael began slipping back into darkness, and it was only getting worse. He was always on the verge of darkness, and just a slight push would bring it out. Tate didn't push him slightly, he shoved him. Michael asked if he was Tate's son, and Tate replied, "You're not my son. I couldn't produce something as horrifying as you." Michael went back to his killing toys. Not just killing but also dissecting them for fun. Killing meant nothing to him. He even considered it meaningful. The house was sold, and new tenants, who spent their life savings on it, moved in. As soon as they did, they were killed. The man tried to stop Michael, but a wave of anger threw him across the room. The man sorrowfully asked, "These were good people. Why kill them?" Michael became enraged. He hated being lectured more than anything. He spread his arms, and two women's souls, even as ghosts, were consumed by fire. They wouldn't be reincarnating now, they'd be dust for eternity. At that moment, the man realized he could never save Michael. There's no way to redeem a demon. Have you noticed how bad luck always seems to snowball? Evil works the same way. Once it starts, it's impossible to stop. Even the last trace of humanity in Michael was now gone. The Dark Lord opened the gate, and Michael was about to fully become a demon. To ensure he embraced the darkness completely, Miriam drove in the rain to find a girl waiting for the bus, pretending to be a good Samaritan, offering her a ride. Once the girl got in, there was no getting out. She soon drifted off to sleep. This wasn't about revenge or gain, this was just a test of Michael's darkness. The woman grabbed a knife, screamed, "Hail Satan," and stabbed the girl. The Dark Lord slid the blade down the girl's body, reached in, and pulled out her heart. The girl was still alive when the heart was removed, only dying after. The heart was still warm, and Miriam served it fresh to Michael. Even someone like Miriam, who had seen a lot, was shaking as she looked at the still beating heart. But Michael wasn't nervous or afraid. He calmly picked it up and took a bite. He wasn't fazed at all. In fact, he seemed a bit excited, fully enjoying the moment. A small demon climbed onto his back, and at that moment, the demon was fully born. His mother didn't want to see her son become a demon, so she took a knife, intending to kill him too. But before she could get close, she was engulfed in flames. Thankfully, Tate saved her. From that day, Michael left the house, and maybe his departure was the only thing that could bring peace to the place. Perhaps. In Michael's mind, even his mother wanting to stop him pushed him deeper into darkness. No matter the case, Madison had to report back Michael could not become the supreme witch. That girl was beautiful, but unfortunately, her days were numbered. Dinah targeted her, and soon she'd be stripped bare, allowing Dinah to reach in and rip out her heart. All of this wasn't personal, it was just business. The older woman paid Dinah to do it. Turns out, the beautiful girl had stolen the older woman's husband. If they were truly in love, then Dinah would rip her heart out, blend it in a smoothie, and force her husband to drink it. She was doing what many women dream of doing but don't dare to. Dinah wasn't particularly angry at the man. She just loved money and was doing her job. Venable came to Dinah knowing she loved money and worked efficiently, hoping Dinah would stop Michael from becoming the supreme witch. Venable, a supreme witch herself, personally invited Dinah to help. But Dinah didn't care for people, she only cared for money. Don't underestimate Dinah, she was known as the queen of poison in their world. And she was no ordinary person. She summoned the emissary from hell, hoping he could help stop Michael. Their negotiations were going well until an overweight girl showed up apparently. She had a grudge against Venable. That girl ended up becoming the demon's assistant. And because of these minor details, the deal fell apart. The main reason for the failure was that the Hell Emissary wanted all the witches' souls in exchange for stopping Michael. Venable, of course, refused, and the Hell Emissary left without a second thought. Dinah was furious. She believed that even without the Hell Emissary's help, Venable would lose all the witches anyway. Everything at the Magic Academy was normal, except for Venable, who was clearly not herself. She could barely walk straight. Who wouldn't feel weak in the knees facing something like this? The teacher noticed something was off and helped Venable to her room. Venable told her the truth and advised her not to speak out, to avoid unsettling everyone, no matter his age. Every holiday the old man would gift his wife something special. The grandma happily opened the gift box, only to find she didn't like it. The old man kept trying to explain. The grandma was furious, and the consequences were serious. She grabbed the knife from the table. The old man didn't believe she would actually do anything, but with a swift motion, she slashed, and his guts spilled onto the floor. The grandma let out a laugh, clearly enjoying herself. At that moment, a child heard the commotion and ran in. The grandma said, "It must be Santa. Go hang your stocking by the bed." The child, innocently, ran back to their room, and the grandma dragged the old man's body to the storage room to clean up the blood. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Turns out, Santa Claus had really arrived. The grandma shooed him away because of the blood on the floor. But this wasn't really Santa, it was a killer dressed as him. He came down the chimney, holding a knife. The grandma told the child to escape through the window. She didn't run herself. Santa walked into the room, and the grandma covered her mouth, screaming. The atmosphere was terrifying. Santa raised the knife. Just at the most suspenseful and horrifying moment, he coughed. The grandma, a bit annoyed, felt like her perfect dramatic expression was wasted. That's how acting is. If one actor messes up just a little, you have to start over. At that point, Madison arrived on set to find the grandma, who was actually an undercover witch. She wanted to leave the witch world, living a quiet life, acting, enjoying her final years. But reality had other plans, because Michael was about to bring about the apocalypse. The witches had to unite to stop it. Would you be scared if you saw a group of these old ladies on the street late at night, dressed in all black? They could make the dust on the street stir with just a flick of their fingers. They weren't messing around. This was someone's ashes, all that remained after Miriam killed them. Another witch could raise both hands and summon a man's soul back from the dead. The man told everything he knew and even what he didn't, hoping Venable could save the world. Venable began planning to take down Miriam. She first sent Coco to tease Miriam, but unexpectedly, Miriam shot at her without a word. Turns out Miriam knew Coco's identity. After getting out of the car, Miriam didn't expect someone behind her. She was captured by a man in black and thrown into a car. The magic mentors had developed a special powder. When released into the air, it would make anyone who breathed it bleed from all 7 orifices. The strange part? The powder only worked on women. Men were unaffected. They were imagining what it would look like when the women started bleeding, getting more excited the more they thought about it. Just then, the witches walked in. The mentors were first surprised, but then not scared, knowing Venable's power had weakened and she couldn't touch them. But Venable raised her hand, and the powder ignited into flames. With another wave of her hands, 2 mentors were silenced, their mouths sealed as if glued shut. They, along with Miriam, were taken to the underpass, where they were to be executed by gasoline fire. The worst part? Their old friend was the one pouring the gasoline. It was the man Miriam had killed. She couldn't understand how he was back. Before she could figure it out, he was burnt to a crisp too. Michael arrived at the underpass, not to live there, but devastated by the sight of the charred bones. This was his mentor, the man who helped him master his dark powers, and now he was nothing but ash. When he saw that Miriam had also been reduced to a pile of carbon, his pain deepened. She was his most loyal servant. Michael let out a sorrowful cry to the sky. These were his people, now all turned to dust. Venable arrived too. Still believing that Michael had been led astray by them, she was convinced that a part of Michael's humanity was still alive. If they could amplify that and suppress his darkness, he could become a charming, adored man. But Michael couldn't forget he was the son of Satan, and he didn't know what was real anymore. But since people kept saying it, Michael believed it. If he saw himself as a prince, how could he possibly accept being a commoner? Michael harshly warned Venable before walking away. Though Michael could throw out tough words, he knew deep down he was in an awkward position. Like a soaked chicken, he walked up the mountain and drew a small circle in the dirt, not to curse anyone, but hoping the Dark Lord would appear. He crouched in the circle for 4 days and 4 nights, but the Dark Lord never showed, and hunger drove him to hallucinate. When you're starving, everything looks like food. Michael realized that hunger-induced hallucinations wouldn't solve his problems. Getting back to the city to find food was the way to go. He was clever enough to know that there were still underground organizations around. He found an underground church where they liked to hang their crosses upside down, and they had plenty of followers. The leader spoke passionately, and what was even more surprising was that an old woman sitting next to him offered Michael food. As a prince, Michael couldn't possibly settle for cookies, but the old woman was quite hospitable and offered him a proper meal. The old woman, smoking her cigarette, noticed Michael was slow to react and considered killing him to save him from disgrace. But when she saw the bite mark behind his ear, she immediately knelt down, shouting, "Long live the prince! Hail Satan!" This woman definitely made her living with her words. Her job was to indoctrinate her disciples every day, to set the mood. She even prepared a real sacrifice, a man and a woman, to offer to Satan. She had never seen Satan herself, but she believed that killing them would be a sufficient offering, whether out of ignorance or cleverness. She confidently waited for the crowd to cheer as the sacrifice was about to take place. But suddenly, the old woman entered the room with Michael, and the woman who was ready to kill paused, still talking nervously. When Michael pulled back his ear to reveal the bite mark, the woman was dumbstruck, and everyone immediately knelt, chanting, "Long live the prince." The woman handed Michael a small knife to finish off the man and woman. This was something Michael had enjoyed since childhood. With one swift motion, he ended their lives, not even blinking, and was instantly hailed as an idol. Everyone gathered around him, watching him eat. Michael felt uneasy under their gaze and ordered them to leave, leaving only the old woman for company. The old woman, puzzled, asked Michael why he was all alone. If he was a prince, even without a team, he should at least have magical powers. Michael, for the first time, let his emotions show, venting his frustration and shedding tears. The old woman comforted Michael, telling him she had a solution. She recommended 2 scientists to Michael, saying they could not only create people but also clone exact replicas. Excited, she took Michael to the tech building, suddenly feeling youthful again, as if she had turned 18. Michael entered the tech building and met the scientists in their lab, where they rarely left. These 2 were geniuses. The people they created were more human than humans themselves. The way their hands moved was flawless, as if natural. While these scientists were brilliant, their bad habits would shock you. Even while they focused on their work, under the table, a woman was also working for them. At that moment, Michael arrived. The scientists didn't know who Michael was, but when he showed the bite mark behind his ear, they thought it was just a tattoo. But the woman next to them felt uneasy and quickly ran out. With a single glance from Michael, the woman burst into flames and was reduced to ashes. The scientists were terrified, immediately kneeling and shouting hail. Although they had lost a valuable assistant, they quickly forgot about it and grew excited at the prospect of starting a new project. Looking at a picture of Miriam, Michael asked them to recreate her. They threw themselves into the task, and soon Miriam's exact replica was complete. Miriam opened her eyes and sat up. After Michael took her away, the scientists became furious. They hated being forced to do something against their will, and it was clear that creating Miriam had been a violation of their principles. The more they thought about it, the angrier and more upset they became. Meanwhile, at the Magic Academy, the witches were calmly holding a meeting, and the teacher remained as beautiful as ever. But Dinah opened the door, letting Michael into the room. Michael was ready to unleash his fury, and his presence shocked everyone. The teacher tried to fight, but Michael immediately manipulated the air, using nails to kill some of the witches. Then Miriam raised her hand, and a machine gun wiped out the rest. including the beautiful teacher. Venable heard the commotion and, along with the 2 remaining witches, fled through the window. Michael looked around the second floor, disappointed to find no one there. Dinah entered the room, realizing that by opening the door, she had essentially wiped out the entire coven. She had thought Michael was the worst, but now she realized the 2 mad scientists were just as evil, and to her surprise, they also wanted the world to end. The Miriam they had created could be controlled, and they could see everything through her eyes. These 2 madmen were influencing Michael's thinking, presenting him with a new idea for the apocalypse. While Michael had always planned to use magic to bring about the end of the world, the scientists had a different vision. Why rely on magic and witchcraft when nuclear bombs would be much more effective? Even if some people survived the initial blast, radiation would ensure their demise. A technological apocalypse was far superior to a magical one. Technology, they argued, was the key to population control. Madmen indeed. Michael, intrigued by this new idea, began shifting his focus, gathering brilliant minds from the tech world. Within days, he had rebuilt his forces. Whether it was his luck or humanity's misfortune, the Devil's plan was back on track. Meanwhile, Venable arrived at the scientist's office. They smugly told her that they wouldn't be working there much longer. Their company, like nearly every company, would soon disappear. Excitedly, they told Venable that the world was about to end, and no one could escape this fate. But since Venable knew them, they offered her a place in a bunker. In that bunker, Venable would be in charge, free to make any rules or laws she wanted. These 2 seemed cute at first glance, but they were actually twisted. They were planning the apocalypse, pointing their fingers like it was some brilliant strategy. They were workaholics, preparing to detonate 1,000 nuclear bombs simultaneously. Venable thought long and hard, unable to find a way to stop everything. In the absence of solutions, there was only one option left: to try time travel. After the apocalypse, the witches survived in the bunker. Since they couldn't stop the nuclear weapons, they planned for the aftermath. 2 witches traveled back in time, but they lost their memories in the process. After the apocalypse, Venable and Madison emerged from the ground and entered the bunker. The witches had been poisoned by the apples, but Venable revived them. It was all part of her plan. They used a complicated method to survive and return, but then Michael appeared, and as soon as he did, every witch got goosebumps, feeling terror and anxiety. To their surprise, the poison witch was still there and insisted on siding with Michael. She loved the smell of radiation after the apocalypse, but the arrival of the Queen Witch ended her life. With one strike, the poison witch fell, and Miriam lost control. It turned out the 2 mad scientists had one more trick up their sleeve. Miriam self-destructed. The explosion was so powerful it flung Michael across the room. Madison picked up Miriam's machine gun and started firing at Michael. Michael was hit by many bullets and collapsed, looking as though he were dead. Do you know how ruthless Michael is? Anyone he kills doesn't just die, they turn to dust, with no soul left behind. He nearly wiped out the entire Girls' Magic Academy. Venable climbed out of a window to escape. She planned to summon the souls of the dead witches while she slept. As long as she could summon their souls, she could bring them back to life. But those killed by Michael were reduced to dust, leaving Venable devastated, nearly dying of grief herself. Then Madison remembered something. She headed to the house where Michael was born. During her investigation, she discovered that when Michael kills, only dust remains. Venable slapped her, asking why she hadn't reported this earlier. They were on the verge of an internal conflict, but luckily, the witch's emotional intelligence calmed everyone down. There was no way to stop Michael now. The only card left in their hand was Mallory. Mallory had a mysterious power, but no one knew how to use it. Venable thought of sending her back in time. If she could save the general's family and prevent the rebellion, they could stop the creation of the nuclear weapons Michael needed. Without those weapons, the apocalypse would remain just a myth. Venable successfully sent Mallory back in time, but her attempt to stop the rebellion failed. Hearing gunshots, she tried to use a spell to create a protective barrier. It might have worked, but the gunshots distracted her. Mallory returned to the bathtub, half her soul missing. Terrified, Venable was disappointed, and she and the witches went to the Boys' Magic Academy. They knew Michael had graduated from there and mastered his dark powers through that very school. Venable hoped to unite the male students to resist the impending disaster, but, to her shock, Michael had already slaughtered the entire Boys' Magic Academy. When the devil works, he does so with maximum cruelty and ferocity, without any trace of emotion. Everyone ran upstairs in panic, but Mallory managed to evade both Michael and the nuclear bombs, only to be stabbed by a man. The witches, enraged, burned the man to ashes in retaliation. Michael fully resurrected, and with just a flick of his finger, Madison's head exploded. As he ascended the stairs, the Queen Witch tried to stop him, but Michael reached into her chest and ripped out her heart. Coco attempted a sneak attack, stabbing him with a knife, but Michael shrugged it off as if nothing happened. With a simple gesture, Coco collapsed. Michael pulled the knife from his chest. He made his way to Venable, feeling victorious, convinced that Venable was about to suffer a total defeat. But Venable had one final move. She grabbed a knife and stabbed herself in the heart. Her death allowed Mallory to time travel once again. To kill a devil, you have to do it before he's even born. Time rewound to when Michael lived with his grandmother. Just after he had killed a priest, unable to handle it anymore, his grandmother threw him out. Michael nearly attacked her but let go at the last moment. At this point, his humanity still existed. He hadn't fully turned into the dark entity yet. Heartbroken, he walked out of the house, only to be hit by a car. Don't think it was an accident, it was entirely intentional. The driver was Mallory, who had traveled back in time. How she got the car is a mystery. She reversed the car and hit Michael again. Then she drove forward once more, running him over again for good measure. His grandmother, heartbroken, held him as he told her he was scared. He wanted to go back into the house and be with her forever, but suddenly, his grandmother seemed to understand something and coldly walked away, leaving him behind. With Michael gone, the witches could finally find peace, and the world returned to its normal, bustling state. Timothy fell in love, got married, and had a child. They were busy with work every day, leaving the child in the care of a nanny. They bought food, planning to bring it home to make the child happy, but when they got home, they found the nanny murdered. Their 3-year-old had already developed such a dangerous capacity. The couple was terrified.